Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. School shooters aren't born, they're made, and it's never too early to begin a life of crime. Hartford, Michigan. A 12-year-old walks into a gas station with a pistol. You already know he's from the suburbs or the sticks. He tells the gas station attendant to put the money in the bag. The attendant, a woman, asks if this is serious. The pint-sized punk fires a warning shot into the ceiling to prove that it is. He then ran off with $3,800 in cash. He was caught soon thereafter.
He actually had his hands like he would possess a firearm. And he actually turned towards her with his hands together. He's probably very lucky that he did not get shot.
Police said that he had his hands like he possessed a firearm, and he's very lucky that he didn't get shot. No, he's not very lucky. He's just white, because Tamir Rice was also 12 years old, and unlike this punk, Tamir Rice wasn't a criminal. He never robbed a gas station. He had a toy gun in a park, and police murdered him without even seeing the so-called weapon. There was no robbery, no firing of any shots, simply the accusation that there was a black child with a gun that they were told was probably a toy, and police murdered him. Which of course didn't happen to this little thug. Police say the young man, and that's what he is, he's a man at this point, told them the robbery wasn't about the money, that he did it for personal reasons and his plan would be ruined if he told them why. Now what 12-year-old has a plan? That sounds and smells like garbage, and especially seeing as how he's in jail, whatever plan he allegedly had is clearly now ruined. This young man allegedly stole the gun he used in the robbery from his grandfather's safe, and he somehow learned the combination to the safe, according to the police. Once again, the authorities are crafting the story so as to make sure that they remove all responsibility from the young criminal's guardians. That's why you notice the lack of outrage from the police. Nobody talking about what kind of home did he grow up in? And what about community leaders and such? The whole community failed if it produces a 12-year-old thug like this. They're very casual about it, though. I guess they figured that this kid's demographic is usually involved in a school shooting about his age, so it's a good thing it was only a gas station, this time. But as we all know, when you're part of the class of people who are genetically immune from law, you always get a slap on the wrist. The last time Michigan had a young man running around with a gun was Ethan Crumbley. They could have stopped him too, more than once. But that genetic immunity from law means nothing was going to happen. Now, in the case of Ethan Crumbley, it made international headlines when his parents were also held accountable for helping to facilitate the atrocity he committed, but it shouldn't have been a headline at all. The powers that be, however, don't want that kind of thing to become habit-forming, so as we see in this case, they're already downplaying the role or responsibility of this preteen punk's guardians. And I think we're all honest enough to admit they're not going to give the old college try to this one because they never do. The prosecutors won't seek any real time or demand any real consequences. The prosecutors and the judge will all claim that, well, it's his first offense. He's young. That's usually the get-out-of-jail-free card for all of these criminals, ask Brock Turner. Or they'll say he has a mental or emotional issue. Say, nobody got hurt. No autopsy, no fouls, so let's not make too much out of it. We don't want to ruin this young man's life. And then they'll release him to his grandparents or whomever his legal guardians are because they've been doing such a great job of keeping him out of trouble so far, haven't they? And then in a few years, when this punk inevitably murders someone, or more than likely a number of people, these same so-called authorities will be shrugging their shoulders and saying, "How were we to know?" In a few years, this punk's juvenile criminal record is going to be wiped clean. And when he turns 18, he'll have no problem getting his hands on a gun of his own so he can go and commit some real crimes. With black children accused of a crime, the authorities look at them as being on a continuum, that if they're already having trouble with the law at a young age, well, it's just inevitable they're going to commit some other bigger crime, so best to throw the little Negro in a cell now and go ahead and stop him before he goes any farther. This was the basis for William Bratton's stop and frisk in New York, the so-called broken windows policy. But as we see, just like with stop and frisk, the policy of stopping offenders early never applies to offenders of a certain complexion. This case is an example of culture. People who think absolutely nothing of buying their kids guns for their birthday, teaching them that it's a toy, and in a society where certain people are handed everything, taught that they are exempt from the rules, never face consequences for their behavior, no matter how dangerous or harmful, never told they're wrong and never told no, a society that does that entitles psychopathic entitlement. This conditions them that the first time things don't go their way, they can kill people, and why not? All their lives, society has given them a slap on the wrist, no matter what they've done. This society breeds these entitled thugs and murderers. They're immune from law. They know they're immune, and the so-called authorities don't care, so why shouldn't they just rob people? This is, in part, also the Rittenhouse effect. Teenage punks who saw a teen killer get away with killing 2 people and grievously wounding a third, and then being treated like a hero by the white right. That sends the message that teens who shoot people are no big deal, and in fact, it's the road to fame. It's a shame that they refuse to put out this punk's mugshot. That way, when he goes ahead and inevitably commits an even bigger crime in a few years, we can go ahead and put the 2 pictures side by side and show this criminal through the years. Our second crime report you can file under How to Not Get Away with Murder. Yesterday we talked about James Patterson, the overrated hack novelist who has fame, fortune, hundreds of millions of books sold, and a phony victim mentality. Well, there must be something in the air that's making these writers extra stupid this week, because we also have another case of another low-talent writer who's guilty of an offense, the criminal kind. Multnomah County, Oregon. Nancy Brophy was a self-published romance novelist who once wrote an essay entitled How to Murder Your Husband. In a case of art imitating life, on Monday, Brophy was sentenced to life in prison for murdering her husband. Now, who could have seen that one coming? Prosecutors say that Brophy spent $15,000 on guns and gun parts. She bought a so-called ghost gun assembly kit. Ghost guns are unregistered and untraceable firearms. But it turned out she didn't have the skill to assemble the ghost gun herself, so she instead purchased a Glock 17 in February 2018, and she began practicing at a public shooting range in March. On June 2, 2018, Brophy's minivan was spotted on surveillance video near the culinary school where her husband worked, though there's no video of her entering the school. At 7:20 a.m., Daniel Brophy arrived at the culinary school for work. 8 minutes later, Nancy is seen on video leaving the area. Daniel's body would be found with gunshot wounds to the back and the chest. Investigators found shell casings consistent with the Glock 17 at the scene, and they would later find the ghost gun kit at a storage facility. They never found the Glock used in the crime itself. Prosecutors say the reason that she committed the murder was because the couple had fallen on hard times financially. They were behind on their mortgage and even had to draw from their 401k to pay the IRS and to get work done on their home. The prosecutors say that the $35,000 that Brophy got out of her 401k was where she got the $15,000 from to go on her gun buying spree. And Nancy's solution to all this was to get the insurance money for her husband's death. So what damning evidence did they have that proved that she was just scheming to get some insurance money? Surely she would be smarter than to just tell the police that she was trying to get some insurance money. Well, in an interview with police, Nancy Brophy asked the detective on the case to write a letter exonerating her from her husband's killing so she could collect the money on his life insurance policy. She even told the detective how much the policy was for, $40,000. Now, you're probably thinking 40 grand. Considering all their debts, that's not exactly a big motive to kill them. 40 grand doesn't go that far, not even for a retiree. But as it turns out, Nancy understated the size of the insurance policy just a little. She'd actually taken out 10 life insurance policies on her husband, for which she was the beneficiary, and if she'd collected, she would have gotten $1.4 million and all the equity on their home. And she even would have gotten her husband's workers' comp because he was killed on the job. Suddenly, it becomes very clear she had all the reason in the world to want to see him dead. Which brings us to the infamous essay she wrote. It was a blog post written in 2011 detailing the pros and cons of killing one's spouse. When that came to light, it touched off a media feeding frenzy. So needless to say, Nancy had written herself into a corner. Or did she? Prosecutors tried to introduce the essay as evidence, but the judge declared it inadmissible on the grounds that it was prejudicial. At trial, Brophy decided to take the stand herself and plead her case to the jury, not to mention put her creative writing skills on display. First, she told the jury that the ghost gun was part of research that she was doing for a new book. Keep in mind, this woman was an alleged romance author, not a crime novelist, though I'll bet she could do a better job than James Patterson. But what about her minivan being near the school at the time of the murder? At first, she had told the police that she had been at home all that morning, but on the stand, she told the jury that she had parked her minivan near her husband's school where he worked at, but that was mere coincidence, and she had only parked in the area so she could work on her writing. Now I ask you, what jury could possibly disbelieve an ironclad alibi like that? Well, as it turns out, this one did. Typically, you have to have the weapon used in a crime to get a conviction, but in this case, even without the gun, even without the damning essay, the jury came back with a guilty verdict in less than 2 days. And the judge has sentenced Nancy to life in prison, though she is eligible for parole in 25 years. Considering that she's already 71 years old, that's a stretch. But there's no statute of limitations on racial privilege, so don't be surprised if this gets knocked down on appeal or significantly reduced, or she gets early parole just because. I'm sure she won't like being in prison, but on the bright side, she can always think of it as research for her next book. It just goes to show, from the very young to the very old, the culture of lawlessness never sleeps. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones that the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Wesley Monroe, Frank Den, Suleiman Alaji, Frank Baker, and Lo Have Mercy. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.